Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going over my Draftkings and Fanduel Week 2 NFL first look picks. Hope you guys all had a great Week 1. It was a decent week. I mean, not the best, but broke even, made some money, so that's always a positive. I'll play about 8 slates on Sunday, 2 showdown slates, obviously at the last game of the night, but the early main afternoon for Draftkings and Fanduel. Draftkings main did well, 155.26 hit in GPPs and a lot of cash games. Fanduel main fell short. The early slate for Fanduel did well. DraftKings early did cash and double ups. The afternoon slates missed, but overall, not terrible. We have the Denver Broncos and the Seahawks game starting in about an hour. So I wanted to get this video out so I can go watch that game. But let's go ahead and get started. As always, if you enjoy the video, I appreciate it. Hit the like button for me. Subscribe if you haven't already. We'll have a lot of videos out throughout the week once again. We got almost 180 likes last week's first look. If we can get close to 200, that'll be awesome. A lot of times doing a first look is very helpful. This is just examining the plays, not really doing any research beforehand, just seeing what guys and prices stick out, what matchups stick out. Look at some injury news that we have already to start off the week. Last week's first look, if you watched it, featured a lot of good plays. We had 4 out of 6 did really well with Winston as the quarterback. A.J. Brown went off. Michael Pittman went off. Travis Kelce went off. The running backs that I had, Jones and Najee Harris, they didn't do well. But 4 out of 6, we'll take that. See if we can do all 6 of these plays to do really well. Starting off at quarterback, Kyler Murray is your most expensive option. He's $7,500. He got some garbage time stats against the Chiefs, but he had no business, really, and they had no business even being in the game, which they weren't. Just got absolutely owned by Patrick Mahomes. So he's still going to be without his number one weapon, and we'll see if Rondale Moore is able to suit up this week, but I really don't want to pay all that much up for Kyler Murray. We have Lamar Jackson, who's 100 last. He also had a decent game, 3 touchdowns, only had 17 yards on the ground, so that's definitely something that he can do a lot better on week to week. I mean, that was probably one of his worst rushing performances in a while. He did have 5 in week 14 against the Browns, but that one he didn't even play much at all. So against the Dolphins defense, they are pretty stout, as we saw against the Patriots. I mean, they do force some turnovers. But Jackson at home, I think you'll have success. But once again, I like to go cheap at quarterback. It almost did not work out last week with Winston, but he had some garbage time. Not even garbage time because he got the win. But in the fourth quarter, they needed to make a comeback, and it was throw, fast-paced. And he was able to hit Michael Thomas twice for touchdowns. Mid-range is okay this week. I mean, you got a couple guys to stick out. Also, I passed on Russell Wilson, but he's 72. It could be one where they rely on the running game, but once again, Houston was a surprise in week 1, but they're going into Denver, not an easy place to play. Expect the Broncos to probably be up, so probably looking to go cheaper than Wilson. 6 mid-range for 6Ks. We have Tom Brady against the Saints. Saints defense, they gave up some good fantasy production to Marcus Mariota and a couple of guys on the Falcons receiving core in week 1. That did not include Pitts, who only had 1 catch. But Brady is okay. I mean, it's pretty easy to stack Brady, especially if there is no Chris Godwin, who left the game with the hamstring issue. If he's not able to suit up this week, then you can plug in Brady and Mike Evans easily, and then even get to like Fournette, who, those guys, Fournette and Evans, are going to get so much targets if Godwin is not able to suit up this week, which probably won't happen on a hamstring issue and a guy that's coming back from an ACL. Other options in the mid 6K range would be like Stafford to bounce back. He didn't have any time to throw the ball against the Bills, and he might not have that time again against the Falcons, but the Falcons coming off of last year, they had like 17 sacks for the whole season, and they had like 4 or 5 against Winston in week 1. So that was maybe an anomaly, or maybe the Saints offensive line is just that bad. We'll see. I think Stafford will definitely have a lot more time to throw, and the matchup is still solid against the Falcons pass secondary. They just were able to have success against Winston early in the game because they were just getting so much pressure on him. Below 6K, we have Carson Wentz, who kind of shocked everybody and played really, really well. I mean, he had 4 touchdowns, also threw 2 interceptions, but 4 touchdowns, 2 to the rookie Jahan Dotson, and 1 to McLaurin, 1 to Curtis Samuel. He did a good job spreading the ball around. He's 58 against Detroit. I mean, he would be in play as a value. I have no problem there. Trey Lance, $5,700. Now, he did not play well, but it was also just not a very high-scoring game. Weather wasn't great, and did have a couple of turnovers. had an interception. I think he had a fumble too. I might have recovered that. But he also wasn't able to, really get into a groove throwing the ball. He didn't have his tight end in George Kittle. I expect Kittle to probably play this week and actually have a playable field, but it's supposed to be sunny, even though it's a week out. But he's at home. I think he'll play well. In the last 3 games that he started, he had averaging almost like 17 fantasy points. He had 2 over 20 and 57 against the Seahawks, who are going to be terrible this year, and they were giving it up on the air last week, and Lance can run as well. He had 54 yards in week 1 in that very, very wet field. So I like him at 57. Also think you can get to Mariota if you wanted to against the Rams, even though it's tough, but he's another quarterback that will run the ball a bit. He had 72 yards as well in a rushing touchdown. So always trying to, if I can, get to a rushing quarterback that's in a decent matchup. So Lance looks solid. Mariota looks pretty appealing. You can even go with Wentz if you wanted to. A little bit, not even that expensive, 58, so he looks solid. And those would be the 3 cheap guys that have my attention. I liked Winston last week. I might not go to him this week just because Tampa's defense is tough. And if they had trouble stopping the Falcons' pass rush, they might have a lot of trouble stopping the Bucs' pass rush. And that's basically it. At quarterback, at running back, we have pretty expensive Taylor, but he did play really well against the Texans. He's $9,900. McCaffrey's $89. He did not play that well, and the matchup was tougher for McCaffrey, even though he was a lot more popular than Taylor. He gets a matchup against the G-Men now, which did a pretty good job on Derrick Henry. He got 2 touchdowns from the other running back that was catching passes, Hilliard, for the Titans. Kamara has a Q tag, but it looks like he's supposed to be fine. It's not something I'm worried about him missing this week. He just didn't get a lot of touches, probably because of that rib injury, and Ingram is still there to kind of vulture stuff. So against the Tampa defense, that's really good against the rush. I will probably pass on that price tag for Kamara. There's some guys in the 6K range that stick out. Right at 7K, we have like Swift, who played really well. I mean, he had a huge game, but then he also lost potentially 2 touchdowns because Jamal Williams ran into touchdowns. So even though Swift had 144 yards on the ground and he had 31 yards receiving, still could have left like 12 fantasy points on the board with Williams taking away a couple touchdowns. Below 7K, we have James Conner against the Raiders. He should perform somewhat decent this week as long as they don't get blown out right out of the gates like they did last week and have to abandon the run. But he had 15 touches. That's going to continue, especially if they're still without Rondale Moore, and he has a knack for the end zone. So, like Connor, like Swift there, Chubb looks fine as well, although Kareem Hunt can also take away touchdowns like we saw, but Chubb played well. Week 1, $6,500 Javonte Williams also kind of sticks out in my opinion, just because we'll see how he plays tonight against the Seahawks. I think he'll play well. The price tag is really appealing for a guy that was being taken early in fantasy drafts, and this is his year to really perform well, even though Gordon is going to be there to back him up. And he's going up against Houston, which was giving up so much yardage and so many points on the ground last year, and that should continue after what they kind of gave up to Taylor in week 1. So at 65, Javonte Williams, that price tag is definitely somewhat appealing. We also have Najee Harris, who's dealing with a foot issue, but they said he should play. But once again, Najee Harris doing Najee Harris things in week number 1. He had I know he had less than maybe 3 yards per rush, probably 2 point something. He had 10 carries, 23 yards, and he was banged. He got hurt after that, but it's still somewhat risky, I would say, just with that issue that he's dealing with. Instead, I'm going with Gibson, who gets a dream matchup against the Lions, who gave up 4 rushing touchdowns against the Eagles and giving up big yardage for Miles Sanders. We saw Hurts break some runs as well. And Gibson, after worry with him was, first of all, that he was not going to start with Brian Robinson looking like he was going to take the job. But even before that, his concern was not getting the ball in passing situations and being taken off the field. But Carson Wentz was looking for him all day. On Sunday, he had 8 targets, 7 receptions, 72 yards, and he also got 14 touches. If we're getting 20 touches for Gibson against the Lions, then definitely want to lock him in at that price tag, especially the fact that Melvin Gordon is basically the same price tag as 61, I'll pass on him with going to Javonte Williams. Then below that, tough matchup for Cordell Patterson against the Rams defense. You have Zeke, who just looks like he's 35 and barely can move sometimes out there, and Cowboys basically get a very, very tough matchup now against the Bengals, coming in after losing a heartbreaker, and the fact that Prescott's out for a couple months at least. In the 5K range, we have potentially getting to like a Rashad Penny, see how he performs today against the Broncos, as well as if Kenneth Walker is going to be able to suit up next week. So that's something to keep an eye on. Travis Etienne, after a lot of talk about him being the guy this year, wasn't convinced, and James Robinson ended up going nuts, and Etienne kind of took a backseat to him. So want to pass on those guys, just too much uncertainty, although Robinson could look to him for tournaments. If Dobbins is back, he probably will still be eased into action, so there's risk with his playing time. And then you could look at Jeff Wilson Jr., just because Eli Mitchell's out for a while, and he should suit up and get a lot of work, as well as Price should be his backup. And then we saw Burkhead after they said Lovie Smith, who also went for the tie at the end, after Lovie Smith was saying that Pierce is going to be the guy on first and second downs, and then he played 25% of snaps. So thanks, Lovie. But that's basically it. I like a lot of the mid-range at running back, Gibson, Williams, even Leonard Fournette, who I passed on, but he looks awesome too at 67, especially if there's no Godwin. Even though the one isn't there, don't really buy into that too much because Fournette's going to catch passes and he's going to get the touches. So him, these two guys, and then going up a little bit potentially for like a Barkley, if you wanted to, probably like him more than Kamara, as well as Mixon. Wide receivers, you have Cooper Kupp at $9,900, almost $10K for him. Picked up right where he left off in week 1, even though they got smoked by the Bills. He did his part. Devontae Adams, he had almost 50% of their target share in week 1. Just missed it. 50%, he had like 49 point something or 48 point something. But Adams going to be the guy for Derek Carr. Even though Carr struggled, he still had Adams found him for 141 yards and a touchdown. If I'm paying up for these two guys, I'd rather get up to Adams and save $1,300 because both guys are going to get targeted heavily and both matchups are very solid. Chase against the Cowboys, we'll see, he's definitely third, I would say, behind those top two guys. But if T. Higgins isn't able to suit up, which probably you think he will, then he might jump into the mix and be a little bit more enticing. Samuel at 78. I don't think he can really play him over those top guys, although he could be more involved in terms of getting carries, just because we saw that happen a lot last year. So even though Wilson might start, he could still not see a ton of work, and they let Deebo Samuel be the de facto running back. So he's in play, I would say. Don't mind getting to any of these top 4 guys. Probably rank it Devontae Adams favorite, then Cooper, then Chase, and Deebo. Mid-range, once again, Michael Pittman. If you wanted to get to another guy that's going to be targeted heavily, get to Pittman instead. His price tag went up, but he was way too cheap in week 1. It was obvious that he should be a lock that week with $5,500 in a good matchup against the Texans, and with them not having any other receivers really with experience too much. And Pittman got 13 targets, 121 yards, touchdown. Now he gets to match up against the Jags, who gave up 4 touchdowns passing to receivers. Like Pittman's chances to potentially get another one. Mike Evans, I'm putting him in as well at 68 just because if there is no Chris Godwin, then you're going to want to play Mike Evans no matter. He's going up against the Saints secondary, not too worried. The fact that if there is no Godwin, we're getting Evans, who should be probably over 7K, possibly even close to like 75, 76. And coming off of a season where he had 16 touchdowns, even though he was banged up in games and he left lots of games early, he's going to be the guy in red zone situations, especially without Gronk this year. So those two really stick out in the 6K range. Other guys that would stick out would be like Sutton at 61 if you wanted to play him. We'll see how he looks today against the Seahawks. Below $6,000, we saw an incredible catch by Deontay Johnson, but not going to play him against the Patriots. Thomas looks okay if you wanted to. He had a huge fourth quarter. Maybe he can actually have success early in the game if they're able to move the ball, which they weren't for 3 quarters against the Falcons. We also have Jerry Jeudy, who's affordable at 56. Julio Jones, if there's no Godwin, will probably become more heavily involved. He did play pretty well in week number 1. But unfortunately, my eyes are going to Allen Robinson the second. He's just very cheap at $5,500. I'm hoping that they actually, and Sean McVay, dial some things up in practice this week to get him the ball early in the game. I mean, it's the same exact thing that happened with Robert Woods last year. Woods was very upset basically like week 5, week 6 of the season that he wasn't getting targeted as much as he should. And that's going to happen with Allen Robinson. I mean, they're going to have nobody that wants to play in Los Angeles if Stafford just dots the cup every single time. Like, Robinson is talented. He should get some looks, and after getting 2 targets in week number 1, that's unacceptable against the Falcons defense. I think Robinson will have a much better game, if not a great game, at that price tag. It's pretty hard to pass when he is similarly priced to like Cooper, Boyd, Anderson, who did have a good game, but he also came on a big reception. Drake London, Renfro, like Allen Robinson will still play him just because the Rams are going to score more points, and we'll see how if Van Jefferson's able to suit up this week. Who's 35, he could be a nice value. Could be in line to miss week 2, so that even makes Robinson look a little bit better, but we saw him not play week 1, didn't make much of a difference. Tight ends this week, you have no Kelsey, so Andrews would be their top dog, although I think you can consider Kittle if you wanted to. And then 5K range, Waller would be the favorite over the other guys. 4K range, possibly Hawkinson, possibly Ertz and Higbee. 3K range, like big Albert O from Denver, just to get to a value guy with some upside. Evan Ingram, 36. He had 4 targets, 4 catches. And then Logan Thomas, who's going to probably become more involved as he gets more up to speed, but he missed a lot of time. But he still was able to play week 1, which was nice to see. And then defenses, always like to go cheap. Defense, it worked out great with the Dolphins in week 1. This week, obviously, the chalk is going to be the Bengals defense. I mean, cash games, you're going to want to play them at $2,200 against Cooper Rush. And the Cowboys offense, that's missing Dak, so obvious that Bengals defense looks really good. Wanted to pay up a little bit more. Possibly like the Lions, just because they do, like, Wentz is prone to throwing picks, and one could go for a pick 6, and that would be great. But the Bengals are definitely the cheapest defense. You want to keep an eye on the Patriots against the Steelers. Look fine as well, and then pay up. If you want to go all the way up and be very contrarian, looking at the 49ers defense, looking at the Broncos defense, and possibly the Colts defense. So that's it for DraftKings. Go ahead and glance through FanDuel. All right, so let's get to some picks here on FanDuel. Quarterbacks, starting off same at the top end with Murray and Jackson as your top 2 guys. Then we got Brady at 8K. I'm always looking to go a little bit cheaper. Guys in the mid 7K range are Stafford that sticks out against the Falcons at home, as well as Trey Lance at 75 against the Seahawks. We have Wilson there as well if you think that they'll have to throw the ball, which they possibly could if Houston plays as well as they did against the Colts. But he's also 75. Below him, looking at like Wentz and Winston. And then below 7K, you have like Matt Ryan. Not too many great options at quarterback this week that really stick out, at least in like the mid-range. But if I'm playing Lance on DraftKings, I'll probably try to get him on FanDuel. We'll see. At least in a first look, he looks solid. If we get more value throughout the week, then we can look to get to one of the more expensive guys. At running back, Taylor is 10K, McCaffrey is 9K, similarly priced on DraftKings. Barkley's only 200 less than McCaffrey, but we could see we could see Barkley like kind of emerge like he looked a couple years ago. I mean, he was awesome against the Titans, but his price tag completely shot up. He was like 66, now he's up to 88, so you're definitely paying for him now. Looking a little bit cheaper, you have Mixon against the Cowboys. We have Swift against the Commanders. I do like Fournette a bit at 78. If there is no Godwin, then Fournette's going to not only get a lot of carries on the ground, but he should probably be a little bit more involved in the passing game. James Conner at 76 also looks pretty appealing if we wanted to consider him. But we also have Gibson, so maybe I'll go Gibson. For right now, I was just waiting on Godwin news. Gibson and Javonte Williams, once again, start off pretty similarly. Like both of these guys. We also have Kamara. If he suits up, he looks cheap, very cheap at 72. You can try to get to him even though the matchup is tough against the Bucks. And then Harris is getting a tougher matchup, so I'd rather get to these guys in Williams or Gibson. And then if I'm looking at the expensive 7K, it's going to be James Conner or Leonard Fournette. And then below 7K, it kind of dies off. There's not anybody that I'm really convinced in. Probably the closest might be like Penny if Walker is out again at 65. But, I'd like to get to at least a running back that I can count on to get touches. So probably 7K and up is where I'm looking at this week on FanDuel. Wide receivers, Cooper Kupp approaching 10K again on FanDuel. I like Devontae Adams. He is $8,800. If you wanted to pay it for any receiver, Adams probably be my favorite this week. But if there is no Godwin, then Evans would be one to try to get to at 83. So we'll keep an eye on that news throughout the week. We also have Pittman, who's $7,800, but he should continue to get targeted heavily. So he looks very solid. I'll keep Pittman and go with Evans right now. Not interested in CeeDee Lamb with Cooper Rush there. Not that interested in Marquise Brown if Moore is back. And do like McLaurin, but he has more competition now with the rookie Jahan Dotson there. And Curtis Samuel getting a lot of targets. 7K and under, Michael Thomas, Cortland Sutton. Further down, we have like Jerry Jeudy, 63. Looks very appealing, but we have to go all the way down before we once again get to the guy that I'm going to mention. That I mentioned on DraftKings, I'm going to mention him again on FanDuel, and that's Allen Robinson. $5,700, the same price tag as Julio Jones, Brandon Ayuk, DJ Chark, Curtis Samuel, cheaper than Donovan Peoples-Jones. So, cheaper than like Duvernay, although he did have 2 touchdowns in week 1. But I do like these 3 receivers a lot. If there's no Godwin, then like obviously Evans would be probably one of my favorite plays at receiver. At least on DraftKings, where he's super cheap. On FanDuel, more competition, getting to like Adams or Chase. But as of now, I'll stick with Mike Evans. And then at tight end, see if we can go a little bit cheaper. It might be tough, but if I'm paying up, Andrews looks the best. Mid-range would be like a Dalton Schultz, even though he gets a bad quarterback, but he's still going to have to get some targets. He's going to have to throw to somebody. So he looks okay at 56, like Higbee, Thomas, Albert O, and then at the bottom, like maybe Ingram. Defense, once again, pay up would be like the 49ers. Pay up would be like the Broncos. Mid-range would be maybe like the Giants, or even you can consider maybe the Bucks, but if they can get to the quarterback like Winston, like the Falcons did. But then at the bottom, once again, the Bengals look the best at 39 against that Cowboys. But you also have a lot of defenses cheaper than the Bengals, which we do not have on DraftKings. So if you wanted to go all the way down here, you can punt for anybody. You could consider, I don't really feel great about the bottom 4. Maybe you can consider the Jets against Brissett, or definitely the Patriots would be interesting at 37 against Trubisky. But that's about it for the first look. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed. Pretty similar builds on both sites, at least to get us started. So, yeah, exactly same 6 plays I'm looking at for both sites. We'll see how much that changes throughout the week, but hopefully, you guys enjoyed. Best of luck on the showdown tonight, and I will see you all next time.